Hi guys, I'm Lisa, and this is chapter 2 in the story of me. Well, I'm being attacked by a puppy over here. Um, in chapter 1, I went over the first 12 years of my life and just kind of touched on some of the bigger things that I went through as a child, and it was a lot more emotional than I expected it to come out, and so. If you're here for chapter 2, welcome back. I'm so glad you joined me. Yeah, so the first 12 years of my life were pretty rocky. And at age 12, I was removed from my grandpa because, like I said, I'm pretty sure I think a neighbor heard me telling my grandpa to stop, to not touch me anymore. And so DHS was called, and I remember, or CPS, whatever it is you want to call them, the state was called and reported abuse in my home. And so they came and visited me at my school. And I remember, I think they came several days in a row. And maybe, I don't know. Now saying that, I don't know if that's absolutely correct. You know, having gone through so much in my childhood, my memories are kind of scattered and all over the place. So sometimes I have to think really hard and make sure I'm remembering something accurately, you know. And I think we all do that, especially when trauma's involved. It kind of messes with our head a little bit, you know, and the way we remember things. That doesn't make them incorrect. It's just kind of, I guess, how life is. Hey, can we be nice? That's my feisty dog. She doesn't want to share mom's lap, so at least I know I'm safe with her. No, that's my knee. And so I remember they came and talked with me, and they asked me a lot of awkward, odd questions, and yeah, so the truth came out about what was going on, and I remember that I didn't go back to school after that. They took me, and you know, they placed me in an assessment center was what it was called. It was a group home. And I guess, you know, it was so they could assess me and figure out what I was going to need, you know, what kind of therapy and home and everything else. So I guess while they figured things out, that's where they stuck me. And I remember being there for about a month and being an only child, and especially awkward around children my own age. It was interesting for me, and so I remember I learned a lot, and it was definitely an adjustment and learning a whole different group of boundaries and way to be and interact with people. I don't remember it being a completely horrible time, but it was sketch. You know, and it was the early 90s, though, and so that's kind of my memory of the early 90s. There I go, dating myself again. But I remember that was kind of my introduction to hip-hop and stuff like that. And I had been in a group setting prior. When I was about 10 years old, my dad had me committed to, or my grandpa, however you want to call that, had me committed to a mental institution. So they say, from what I recall, I guess I talked about my grandma's death too much, my mom's death. And so, but then again, that was kind of what was going on in my life. So I guess people just didn't know how to handle me, maybe. And so I remember being there a couple months too, and that was interesting as well. And so, yeah, there was a lot of upheaval, a lot of big people issues going on in my life that as a young person I didn't know how to handle. And even as a grown-up, I think that we all struggle with learning how to handle things like this. You know, they're big, awkward, uneasy issues that nobody wants to have to go through or should ever have to go through. And so dealing with them is at any age isn't going to be easy, you know. Kind of like dealing with this little puppy right here. So I was in the assessment center for a while, and I really don't remember meeting with multiple foster families. I kind of just remember having the one interview, and I remember I I dressed like I was going in for a business interview at like 12 years old. I was totally awkward. I remember in school, my Aunt Joyce used to make me poodle skirts, and I'd wear poodle skirts to school in like fifth grade and stuff. So, looking back, it doesn't surprise me why I didn't fit in. I kind of always just marched to the beat of my own drum, if you will. And so, and that's a good thing. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, I totally just lost my train there. She derailed as she went barking out the door. Um, and so yeah, I remember meeting with this foster family, and I may have met with them a couple times, and they were like, at that point, I think probably the most normal appearing family I'd ever seen in person. I watched a lot of TV growing up, like that was my thing. I just kind of immersed myself in television and in movies, and so I lived vicariously through television and movies. And I honestly, it did help to raise me, right, wrong, or indifferent. So that was where I got a lot of my ideals on what life was supposed to look like, because I didn't really have anybody around teaching me on how life was supposed to be. I just had my preconceived notions, especially as a child, of what the world was like. And I know that all children have their own perception of that, and mine was pretty skewed. And so I had a lot of idealistic thoughts and ideas what life was supposed to be like. And I can tell you that, yeah, no, now we can create that in our lives, but yeah, I was kind of disillusioned at what I thought life was going to be. And yeah, so I got taken from my dad, and he never made it to being convicted of being an abuser. He had 8 counts of child abuse against him, from what I recall, or what I was told. And he shot himself. He killed himself. And I remember I was already at my foster home when my caseworker came and told me. And I still remember the room. I remember the way the sun was when she came in. And she said, Lisa, I've got something to tell you. And I'm like, yeah, what's up? And I remember sitting on my bed with her, because I shared a room with one of my foster sisters. And she was a cool foster sister. And I remember my caseworker sat me down and said, I want you to know that your dad killed himself. And and there's still a part of me that's kind of numb. I remember giving her a reaction because I felt like that's what I was supposed to do. And when inside, I just felt blank. Just kind of numb and blank, and didn't really know. Come on, Iz, you gotta move, pumpkin. Didn't really know how I was supposed to feel. See, I loved my dad. and a lot of people look at me and judge me for that. And even my own family members and I have gotten in arguments over this. But see, these were my parents growing up, and it was all I knew. And I loved my parents. And I remember my dad telling me he was a sick man. And I knew he was a sick man. And I knew that the way I was being raised wasn't an appropriate way. Mental institution at 10. Dad taken away from dad at 12. And then after I was placed in a foster home, I found out and was informed that my dad killed himself as a result of what he had done, his wrongs. Being a child molester, he had 8 counts of child molestation pending against him, and he didn't want to be an old man going to prison. And so he shot himself in the garage in the house I grew up in. And my Aunt Joyce and Uncle Charles, I guess, found him. He was supposed to be going to dinner with them, and he wasn't the type to not show up. And when he didn't show up, they went and looked in the garage because nobody was answering the door, and saw him. I guess he had tried to asphyxiate himself prior, because there was the whole hose in the car in the garage, and the hose in the tailpipe and through the window, and I guess that didn't work. And so the gun did. And yeah, when my caseworker came and told me, like I said, I gave her a reaction, and I still don't know why I did that, other than I felt like it was what was expected, and she was gonna think I was weird if I had no response whatsoever. And so, um, I don't know if I ever really even cried. I mean, I cried because I missed him. Like I said, I loved my dad, and that's caused a lot of friction. Freddie, leave my laptop on. That's caused a lot of friction in my own family. Um, like I said, my aunts and uncle, they were raised by the same people and experienced a lot of the same abuses, and worse than what I did from the stories I've been told. And so I have an aunt who I remember when I was young, teenager-ish, after all this had happened. He stop, buddy. We got in an argument, and she was very verbal with me and judgy with me on how could I love him. And different people, different experiences. Um, they were all I had. Like I said, growing up an only child, lonely child. I don't know. I don't know. I guess that's just who I am, though. I've got this big heart full of love and forgiveness, and everything happens for a reason, right? And so, yeah, I knew he was sick. I knew that my parents had issues, and I knew that things weren't normal. And I always wanted a normal life, which is why. Hi, buddy. Hi, buddy. Which is why I watch so much TV and just kind of immersed myself in another world and disassociated. I have fancy words for stuff like that now. You know, I didn't when I was that age. It was just coping and getting by. And so, yeah, which is something I still work on today, is not disassociating when things get tough. And I know that that's just kind of a trauma response. Hi, Ted. Can you move, buddy? Yeah, I need you to move your butt. Big old beef butt. And so my foster family, like I said, they were like the most normal people I had met. They had a little girl and a happy dog and this beautiful, you know, what do you call it? Middle class home, middle class family. And so I was really excited and wanted to make a good impression on these people, and I'd never had a family. You know, Teddy, we can play ball in a minute. I'd never had a family. And so I felt like I was getting a family. I spent a lot of holidays and time growing up crying, wanting a family, and missing that from my life. And so my foster dad was a youth minister, and my foster mom was a stay-at-home mom. And they were really nice people. And I had two foster sisters, and of course they had a little girl. She was like 2 years old at the time. And so it was a really neat experience from that aspect. And I had a really hard time during that time in my life. They had a system called subsystem. It was like being grounded, but you had to like earn points to get off of being grounded. And I found myself in that situation quite a bit. And I would have to get up before school, which was its own beast, and write papers like perpetrator versus victim and how things affect other people. And that's just what I remember. And things had to be so many words, and they had to fill up so much of the page, and it was so militant. Oh, I remember just not liking life at all. I felt like I was always on the outs with my foster dad. It caused a lot of problems with me. I picked a lot of weeds. And I wasn't a bad kid per se. I talked a lot in school. You know, I was the kid you didn't want to sit next to because I was going to talk to you. And, and, may have had trouble getting my homework done. I wasn't real good with the follow through on the homework, but I had comprehension issues, and I never really had anybody to help me growing up. So I think may have had a few teachers just kind of pass me when I was young. But I made it, and I can read and I can count, and so I what I've learned seems to be suiting me in my grown up life, and what I don't know, I find a way to learn and teach myself. So, but back to my foster parents, like I said, they were really nice people, and we had a really nice home, and it was a really nice family experience. And I remember my foster dad being a youth minister, like I said, and he had some sort of like teenage hangout spot that he was facilitating downtown. And this is like an after school place where all the kids could go and play foosball and do teenage things, and so it was like just a safe place for teenagers to go and be. And I remember enjoying going and hanging out there. And I was the youngest of my foster sisters, so they were both a couple years older than me. And I remember my oldest foster sister, I always thought she was so pretty, and I always wanted to be more like her. And I don't think I ever told anybody that. And then the middle in us fosters, the one I shared a room with, she was hard of hearing. And so I learned a lot of sign language. And even after I moved out of the foster home, we would still keep in contact for quite a while via telephone. I know, funny, right? But there was a thing called TDD, I think, TTY, something like that, if I remember right. And you'd take the phone. This is when we had landlines. I'm really dating myself. So you'd take the phone, you'd call the special number, and it was a relay service. And so what they would do is they'd connect you to the other person, but then you'd take your handy dandy little landline phone and you'd stick it in this machine. And so the machine was like a typewriter. And so I was able to have phone calls with my foster sister. And, that was just a really neat experience. And one of the happier things I remember about my childhood, I know, kind of a random thought bubble there, but my oldest foster sister, she had her own room. They had converted part of the garage. And she was, like I said, I was always enamored with her. She was a few years older than me, and she just really seemed to get along with everybody really well, and I always admired that. And about the time I was, I ended up getting to move back in with my aunt and uncle. My dad, having killed himself, had left a will, and I was part of that will. Joy. Along with a lot of other things like the house I grew up in and trust funds and a lot of things I never even experienced or got to be a part of because life just threw curveballs like that. And we'll get to that a little later. And so I was going through the process of getting to move back home, actually, to the home I grew up in. And so I was really excited for that. I had lived in my foster home a couple of years. And like I said, it was always an upheaval. I always was kind of at odds. Didn't really fit in there. I went to a couple different schools, I think, during that period. And yeah, that was interesting too, just school was always hard for me. I tried really hard to be like everybody else because I didn't know how to be me. And I would see other kids that were popular or that I felt, were popular. And I would emulate them, which didn't help them not liking me. Just trying to find my own way and figure out who I was. And so that in itself has been a journey for me in my life. And I'm still working on that. But I like who I'm becoming, and I'm really grateful for that. And I guess it's who I've always been. It's just been the unlearning of who I'm not. And so I was going through the process of moving back in with my aunt and uncle. This is my biological aunt. She's my mom's sister, and she had 4 children of her own. Yes, 4 children of her own. I had to do the math. And so I have an older cousin who's a year and a day older than me, and then a younger cousin who's 5 years younger than me, and she's the closest thing I have to a sister. We spent a lot of time growing up together. And then I have 2 younger cousins, and one was even, he was 3 and like 8, and I don't know. We were all stair-stepped. Well, my older cousin, he didn't really live with us. Occasionally he came a couple times and lived with us, but he didn't really live there. So I was automatically now the oldest child. And these were my cousins. I'd grown up with them, so it wasn't like it was new being around them or anything, you know. We got along like siblings get along. But I remember when I was moving in with my aunt, she sat me down and had this conversation with me and basically told me that if I ever put my hands on her kids, that she was going to call the cops on me. And if I ever got pregnant, she was going to put me in a home for unwed mothers. And like she gave me all these ultimatums and rules and projections. Looking back, I can see they were projections. And this is a woman I had on a pedestal growing up. To me, she was like the most beautiful woman, and you know, she's my mom's sister, my biological mom's sister, and so I just really, really adored her for a long time until I moved in with her. But see, drugs were a thing in my family, and all my family had their own addiction issues and traumas and stuff. And of course, you know, we all kind of had similar childhoods and we all deal with things in different ways. And I'm no saint myself, but being a youngster and experiencing it, you know, as a youngster with the grown-ups around you going through those struggles is hard. And it was no different for me. And I found out when I was transitioning from the foster home and out of the foster system into my aunt's home, you know, I'm getting to go home, that my foster dad had been having an affair with my foster sister, and so their family was falling apart. And that was really hard, and I still struggle with that one, you know, and we all have our own journeys, you know, and so I ended up losing touch with everybody, and I occasionally wonder how everybody is or how things went, you know, and especially, you know, the people I was close to. When I think about them occasionally, I guess like we all do. Um, and so I got to move home. I got to move back to my old neighbors and all kinds of stuff. And so there was a lot of transition and a lot of adjustment and a lot of things that weren't the way I remembered them. You know, life changes, people change, time changes things. And so in my mind, I was getting to go home. And home wasn't, it was like some Alice in Wonderland version of that. And, you know, my room wasn't my room anymore. I had to share my room with my cousin. And like I said, she's the closest thing I have to a sister. And boy, did we used to quarrel. And she'd run around singing little songs about me, about how she hated me. She'd come up and thump on me and kick me and bite me and stuff. And I couldn't do anything because I was scared I was going to go to jail if I slapped her or something, you know. And unfortunately, my aunt had her, you know, my aunt and uncle had their addictions. And so I was pretty much the grown up now in the house and had a lot of responsibility fall on my shoulders. And I didn't know how to handle all of that. And so I'm trying to deal with school and my cousins and being grounded, and because I, you know, just learning how to get along. And so my aunt and I were always at odds, and it still breaks my heart. I love her and I loved her very much. And at that point, I was seeing her with different eyes than the ones I had grown up with. And I got to see the ugly side of addiction and coming down in the fights and everything else. And this is before I had my own struggles. And unfortunately, we hurt those that are closest to us. And, you know, my uncle would go to work during the day and it was me. And she still had a lot of demons she was fighting. And so we fought, and we fought some more. I had moved in with my aunt, I want to say right around 13. And almost 14 probably. And I left home the day after I turned 15. I couldn't take it anymore. But besides the fighting and everything else, and my aunt even had a stroke at one point and was in the hospital for like a week. And I remember having to leave school early and make sure all the kids were taken care of and help my uncle out and just be there as much as I could. And yeah, I left home. Her It wasn't a good environment for me. She had a lot of people coming and going all the time, all the time. When you're living that lifestyle, it's kind of expected. And see, like I had mentioned a trust fund. My dad had left me like some college money or something, and I was talked into signing this letter, and I didn't realize what I was signing. And it basically gave the money to my aunt and uncle, and now I was supposed to benefit from it too, and it's all good now. I'm grateful looking back, but I wasn't at the time. It really stepped up their addictions, and so it was a constant party. There were guys coming and going all the time, and I was like 13, 14 years old, and yeah, they were hitting on me, and I had some run-ins with my neighbor down the street who was always at my house, and he had kids that were my cousin's age, and he did some things he shouldn't have too. So, and I remember trying to tell my aunt about it, and was completely invalidated or blamed, or it was not received well. I think I may have even got in trouble. And so, when things kept happening and the fighting was getting worse, I couldn't take it anymore, and we got in a really bad fight on my birthday, and she took a belt out, and we squabbed. And I wasn't a fighter. I've never been a fighter, only when I'm defending myself. And she had a belt, and I had bruises and welts for like a month. But after this fight, I was done, and I went to school, and I never went home. And I remember writing her a letter and telling her exactly what I thought, and how I was sorry that my cousins were going to have to grow up with her, and what a horrible person I thought she was. And I'm really sorry for some of the things I said, because I'm sure that, I've exhibited some of those behaviors in my own life, and all we can do is be forgiving of others and ourselves, right? Life's not always easy. We do the best we can until we know better, and then we do better. And so I ventured out on my own, and I guess I'll leave that for chapter 3. And so I appreciate you guys coming along with me on this journey of chapter 2. And if you've made it this far, congratulations, because I know that there's a lot of things in here that, like I said, they're not easy to talk about, so I can only imagine what it's like to hear them. And I know that I've kind of been all over the place in this one, so feel free if you have any questions or thoughts or anything. I encourage you to leave me a comment, and I will definitely respond. And again, thank you for being here. And I'll talk to you soon. Have an inspired day.